Always helped if I turn my microphone on. I think that's my... Hi, welcome. This is Art of Rock. And actually, I'm going to turn everyone's mic on because I always forget to turn everyone else's mic on. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us every Saturday morning. We join forces here. This time, this space thing. ANGELSPIT'S Twitch. If you don't like it, you'd go like it. There's always random shit on there. I should do more random shit. This is brought to you by ANGELSPIT'S Patreon. Many of my supporters are here, and I am so grateful. Thank you. For $3 a month, you can jump on and do random crazy shit. ANGELSPIT'S new single is called Art Imitates War. There's another new single coming out soon, but we'll talk about that later. Ice Planet 9000 just dropped a new video for the track The Ice Rings. Go look at it. It's awesome. The reaction I'm getting to Ice Planet 9000 is really blowing my mind. Totally unexpected, but I am grateful. Bête Noire also has a really cool Spotify thing going on. New track there. Go get it. And if you want to hear a whole bunch of really awesome stuff on Spotify, Industrial Incisions. Like that damn playlist. It's a whole bunch of classic industrial tracks plus, here's Mez, plus a whole bunch of new tracks from bands you need to know about. And speaking about bands you need to know about, MTV TV. Oh, yeah. If you got a video, send it to them. Maz can see your face. That's their Twitch. Like their Twitch. And if you're bored, watch their Twitch, because there's always something really cool going on. It is so cool. It is a return to what MTV wanted to be. It's so cool. They've also got a Patreon. You should back that Patreon because it's fantastic. Because we've got to keep them going. Let's start. Everyone's mics are live, I think. We had a brief conversation about non-Western music. And I'm just going to throw the floor open talking about all sorts of stuff because it's a fun thing, very inspiring thing to talk about. Go. Non-Western music. Mark, you were chatting about stuff.
Yeah. So, yeah, it was kind of just things I've been doing this week. I recently started looking into Hindustani, specifically raga, and like how is that constructed, because it does have a very different feel from Western music. And yeah, that's kind of just it. It was just something cool I was looking into.
That sounds awesome. You mentioned Facebook. I've just put that up there. It's bloody cool. Yeah, does anybody else want to throw anything about raga or anything? Hey, Raz, what you got?
Yeah, I want to stay away from trying to be specific about stuff that I have no expertise or actual cultural background in, and just say one of the fascinating differences that we kind of take for granted. And I throw this term out every week. I say something about Western tonal harmony, and what we don't consider sometimes is what we mean by that. And most of us write the kind of music most of the time that is rock idiom, takes chords, which are notes played at the same time, together to change the sound of where you are in a journey from a tonal center to a distant place and then back. Whereas there are a lot of traditions that just use a single note to do the same thing, and they explore that same sort of tonal journey using a linear scale rather than stacks of notes. And so where our experience with music is generally something like this, where it's a stack of bass line, chordal parts, fun guitar or synth, and then maybe a top line melody and a vocal, doing interacting stuff to build the journey in the story. There are some fascinating traditions to explore that are, say, a bass line and then a single excursion from that with rhythmic variety that we don't normally use, and tonal melodic contours and stuff that we don't normally use, and melismatic flourishes that we don't normally use, meaning that in the vocal and melodic instruments, they tend to dance around notes for expression. They tend to approach them and move away from them. I mean, not just in the here's your home tone, move away from it and back to it. They'll dance in interesting ways, approaching the notes and releasing from the notes and then back to the home key. And it's just a very different great ear-bending trip if you haven't listened closely to Indian classical and Southeast Asian music and some of the Turkish and Caucasus and stuff. So I've definitely agreed. That's what I'm saying.
I love it.
Such good stuff.
Juan, welcome. We're talking about international music and stuff. You've got something to add? Check your hand up. Here's Mark.
I've my experience with it is from the opposite standpoint. John Paul Jones, Kashmir with Led Zeppelin. I mean, that is a stack of sound, right? And the strings in that are just mind blowing. But I find it my experience with it was the exact opposite. So I want to hear what you're talking about because I haven't before. But I find that interesting.
If I can just jump on that for a second, if you notice, one of the hallmarks of what you're hearing is those 13, 16 violins playing in unisons rather than all playing different lines is kind of a hallmark of that.
Coolness.
Cool.
Coolness. Yeah, and is the triplet that he had in there also sort of, or was that just him?
I don't know.
That's fair. Because the whole thing is, and if you watch him play it, there's a video I saw of him playing it live. That was actually like a sequence on a synth he used because he just one noted it for each section, and it was a triplet. I thought it was interesting. I was like, see how stuff is played live, because sometimes you have an idea in your head. Like if you ever look at somebody that's doing like slapback echo on delay, The Edge is a great example. And you think he's playing like 24 notes in an arpeggio, and he's not. He's playing 3, and he's just slapback echo. That is his entire thing, right? But it's his signature. And the thing is, it's still artful because not getting lost in the sequence is an art form. I mean, it's so easy for me to get lost in it. It's like, where was I? That's the trick. It's hard to play. It's hard to keep time and make sure you don't cross out and also don't screw up with your delay timing because it'll just fall apart. Anyway, back to the other thing.
And then being able to drum along with it. So when I was a kid in Australia, we had a really strong gamelan Indonesian culture going on. That it was a thing. And it's a really fantastic thing because it's kind of drone based, just because the instruments created drone. But it's not actually drone based, but it kind of is. And the gamelan key scale is very very foreign, for want of a better term. And there's not like one. There's a whole bunch of them, different regions of Indonesia, which has the population of the United States, FYI. There's a whole bunch of different musical cultures. Most of the drums, for example, are log drums because there are not many big animals with skins that are big enough to stretch across a drum. There are a couple of lizard drums, but predominantly they're log drums. And the gamelans are actually like forged metal. And they're ground down to hit a specific pitch. And the thing about them is when they strike them, they hold it. Strike, hold, strike, hold, strike, hold. So one hand's striking and the other hand's following it around, like muting it. And they can pull some really interesting chords and stuff, but it's really fascinating. And it's also really nice that it's not strictly 4/4 and stuff. Obviously, the timing is very... I don't even know how it's notated, but the timing is very, free. Kind of similar to raga, but raga's not free. Raga's strict as fuck, but you know what I mean. And another very interesting thing I just wanted to pick up on is it's a lot of fun to have something going in a duple, ... 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and eighths. Yeah, something else going on in a triplet, and having them kind of like swap between each other. Yeah, it adds... Yeah, no, I'm talking about not like a dotted. I'm talking about straight triplets.
3 against 4, you end up with 12-bar repeat.
Yes. And also when you have like the actual rhythms themselves going across, like, so you might have one instrument, and this is a fun thing to try. you might have an instrument that's like chunking along in eighths, and another one that's in a bit of a groove, like kind of like swinging those eighths a bit, and one that's actually triplets. And it creates the most wonderful thing. In fact, if you want to just make funk in your music, the kick drum, quantize it to triplets, and it will change the track. It's got to be a certain speed to really work. Like, you know, you can't really go much above 140. Well, maybe you can. Gee, I don't know. Give it a try. Good fun. Okay. Give me something else. Raz, I see your hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in with my fan gushing about the gamelan as well, or gamelan. I guess maybe like sometime between 85 and 92, there was for me anyway, an introduction to that. And you mentioned the way that they pass around rhythms, and they'll have in a traditional chant and mallet percussion kind of thing, like, first of all, the microtonality is great. It's scales that we don't use. It's notes between notes that we're used to hearing in 12-tone, equal temperament, diatonic. And that's fun for the ear. And then they also tend to pass around intricate patterns so that they're playing the polyrhythms across instruments and playing off each other in ways that you don't hear the individual looping repeat of 3-bar, 3 against 4. You hear this entire thing that evolves. And yeah, if you're obsessed about counting time, it's kind of a cool experiment, or study. But if you're just a listener, it's like, I don't know. I mean, you hear the performers doing what feels like a trance-like practice. You know, it's very different. And another group that came up around the same time that people are sampling like crazy was the Bulgarian Women's Choir, and I think the album Le Mystère de Voix Bulgare was the popular one of the time. And they also did a lot of kind of percussive vocal passing back and forth, but landing on tones that are dissonant to the ear as a Westerner, and doing it in absence of chordal accompaniment. So you just hear these very tight, close, dissonant, harmonic stacks of vocals among these very pure tones that are coming out of these women. And it's another striking, another ear-bending experience to take you out of the sort of that 12-tone equal temperament, everything's kind of out of tune life that we all live.
Very nice. Mark!
I think it just dawned on me. I think one of the examples that I really love of someone who will merge non-Western and Western is Bear McCreary. If I had to pick one composer, especially his work on BSG, the All Along the Watchtower with the sitar, I think it is, on there is incredible. He made incredible use of taiko throughout the whole show. He's not afraid to use anything. If he thinks it'll serve the song, he'll bring it in. Electronic, organic, natural instrument, but like he merged a lot of, even as far as like the theme song, it's actually a Hindian Veda, I think it is. Veda. It's actually in Hindi. I mean, from the beginning, he was working outside the normal scope of things on that show, and he did an incredible job of and the thing about it is it's not all one or the other. Like the All Along the Watchtower thing, he starts off with like what feels like Middle Eastern flavor to it, or with slight towards Asian maybe, but then he brings in he is a master of 5-string bass, and he drops that in, and that is Western, but like the fusion of the two, incredible. It just gives me chills.
Good shit. Thanks, man. Ivan!
So, we should not leave out Rishi Sakamoto, because, there's a guy who's managed to take, Japanese and Japanese jazz and everything, stuff it together, mostly play it on a piano and make it sound fucking amazing. So there's that. I had a friend of mine, he spent like 3 years down in Haiti learning ritual drumming, like specifically for ritual performance, which is kind of hardcore, because it's there's always the mains, and then the call, so a high pitched polyrhythm that goes with it, because the purpose is to get people's brains into a state where they're more suggestible, more open, more able to see through the veil, as it were. And he was really good at it. Really, really good at it. Ended up with a rather large drum collection, though, because everything's specialized in that genre. So there's that. And then, if you ever get a chance, check out Vartinia, the Finnish all-women's band. They kind of like modernize Finnish folk tunes. So it's really non-Western in that, like they use the Latin alphabet by accident. And we saw them live, ages ago now, and like the four of them, like they didn't even need mics. Like they just wall of sound coming out of their mouths. It was mind-blowing to see in person. And at the first show that we saw them at that night, they tried to mic them, and their voices were causing feedback. It was just mind-blowing how good they were.
Mic blowing.
Oh, yeah, and mic blowing. And then last but not least, I mean, I think one of the reasons that quote unquote Western music has gotten so far so fast so easily is Western music notation systems it's just math, and it's super generic. It'd be very easy to use the notation system to describe any of the above, because it's just math. Like we managed to magic up a way to like describe pretty much anything, because it's sound over time. And it works. It's very teachable, and I think that's where music schools probably go wrong, is they stick to just like it's the 19th century on that, when you could show up the class how to do some other stuff with and still not give up the notation. You don't even have to give up your instruments. You just try something different, because there's plenty of good stuff around the world out there that is all kind of amazing at the moment. All right, I'm done.
Awesome. Thank you, man. Rizzy, I'll let you go first.
I just wanted to bring us back to Mark's original launching point for this topic was something that Adam Neely posted maybe a year ago or more, comparing the Western hegemony to other possibilities of what might have happened, and what we're missing by making assumptions about Western tonality and classical music being the predominant lens by which we view other things as other and alternative. It's man, I'd say it's mandatory viewing, like from a cultural crit perspective, but just as musicians, it's an important one too. Carl, I think you put the link in the chat on
yes
YouTube.
Yes,
it's just
I did.
Again, I'm holding my tongue to say stuff because he's so specific and so well researched, and it's such a topic that it's good.
I want to hit that, but Mark, I'll let you go first, and I'm gonna start shooting my mouth off.
Not just the tonality though too. I mean, if you think about some of the most well-regarded drummers that we've had in recent history, I mean, Neil Peart and Stuart Copeland both. If you listen to interviews or read interviews with them, they pretty extensively studied African drumming, Indian drumming. Like, I mean, they went to outside cultures, and then they ended up working that into their own influences. I mean, Stuart with reggae is so that's the shallow end, but I know he studied a lot more. He actually visited Africa and studied with drummers over there, and I think that shows through too. And again, a nice hybrid, right? It's not all one, not all the other. I think you can it's sort of, oh, and I don't want to use the word, Ivan shoot me, but synergy.
Ah, why don't you
It's
say
all right.
eclectic? Say eclectic synergy.
Okay, we'll go eclectic synergy. Okay, that's fine. But I don't think it has to be one or the other. I think possibly, the best part is when you merge two different worlds and come up with something that's sort of like, it may be a one-off, it may become a signature sound that, that's yours. But I think, it's neat to take something and make an assemblage of the two and cross things, sort of like a, orchestral techno, I mean, is the thing. And some amazing things are done there. Dubstep too. I've seen orchestral dubstep. I love it. Same sort of thing. Two worlds, just merge them.
Just not Enigma. Thank you very much, Mark. So I'm doing a thing on Debussy, and then Debussy, and then I want to flick around and talk a little about what we've forgotten about orchestral Western classical music. So if you're not into Debussy, get into Debussy, because he's fucking amazing. Still is. And the story goes that him and a whole bunch of the expressionists used to hang out in Parisian cafes, getting very, very drunk on absinthe, smoking fucking cigars. Him and Monet and Toulouse-Lautrec and a whole bunch of these guys. And there were also dancers involved in this as well. And they created this thing. To me, that's just a dream. To go to a cafe, drink absinthe with a whole bunch of different artists and create a movement and go, my music is really inspired by your flowers. My flowers are inspired by your music. My dancing is inspired by your dancing. I've always wanted that. My God, one day I will build a compound and we'll all wear red cloaks and worship Eric. Don't know who Eric is yet. We'll figure that one out. Or maybe Kevin. I don't know. But anyway, so get into Debussy and in a red cloak. Because what Debussy was all about, breaking rules. And sure, it was a piano, and he couldn't do a lot outside of 12 tones with that piano. But what he did was amazing. He would often come up with a separate scale. And when you listen to his music, it is ethereal, it is romantic, it is flowing, and it always has the climax is always in the middle. And then it sort of, goes away. Just the sound of what Debussy does is just, it's so inspiring. When you listen, wow, man, what are those notes? What are those notes? And it's funny that also I will say that one thing I feel that people have forgotten, overlooked, missed in music is the joys of classical harmony, harmonic content, the chordal structures of them. And they're so wonderful. Like people have sort of forgotten that. And when I hear so much music and stuff, it's like there's lots of boundaries that can be pushed here beyond sharp 9, sustain 11. There's places to go here that is just magical, that you can create really magical moods, magical things, and it doesn't have to be done on an orchestra. You can do it on your synths or whatever to just bring something massive, absolutely massive to your music. Like, lovely. That requires study, and study is good. I'm going to shut it now and let Ivan blow my mind.
So one of the advantages of learning the rules is then you know how to creatively break the rules. I don't know if I could live in a world that didn't have accidentals. That would suck. Yeah. Also on the cultural thing, I mean, has anybody ever eaten at a fusion restaurant?
Actually, yes, I have. But I
Yeah.
get your point.
Well, yeah. What was that? When it's done well, is it not freaking amazing?
Yeah.
And
Technically speaking, Vietnamese is fusion. But go
oh,
on.
yeah, no, it's Southeast Asian French, um, and look at the results. It's amazing because, trust me, like pho with just ox would kind of not be as much fun. It'd be a little, it'd be a little tough. But pho with beef, oh yeah. No, now you're in the right place. You've just discovered something amazing because you were willing to look beyond your own borders, which and we should thank the Portuguese too, because as soon as they discovered food in the New World, they went everywhere and spread it as far and wide as they could. And largely resulted in everybody getting a level up. It was like there was a Southeast Asian food. A lot of the ingredients came from the New World. Before they had that, they 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 didn't have those ingredients, and that would have sucked. So there's no reason why music can't be treated the same way.
For shit, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, we should not be afraid of. We should never be afraid of showing appreciation for other cultures by, showing them some love and taking some of what they've done and improving ourselves with it.
Thank you. Portuguese actually obviously invented port, and they also invented the chicken. Yes, they did. Razzie.
Ivan, I'm definitely going to go get a bowl of ramen now because I'm not a pho fan as much.
Everybody has a different way of saying it.
I mean, yeah, so there's only one correct way.
It's just
What's
pho.
the correct way?
That's like everybody said it the same way. So much for that conjecture.
Okay.
When I was in Seattle, I went to a pho place, and when I ordered, the waitress just assumed that I spoke Vietnamese. And I was like, whoa, I can order food. That's it.
Carl, you touched on something that I wanted to sort of go back to, right? I don't know if this is true. Check my math. But I think I can't speak about classical because I don't have enough names to check. But with rock, pop, like radio music, popular stuff starting in the 50s, what became rock and roll, we didn't have a lot of fancy modulations and modal interchange and stuff going on as the top 40 kind of stuff. And then by not exactly sure where I'm getting the echo from, but I am. So I apologize. Is that actually coming through?
No, it sounds fantastic.
Okay. I'll take these off for a second while I finish my thought. So after the simplicity that was going on there, and it's like a great party time focus thing, and people can love it and get total the kind of enjoyment they want out of it. But sometime from the 60s, and I don't know if it was the Beatles' fault, but we got a lot deeper into using all of the 12 tones instead of staying in one diatonic key and moving around, and things got pretty interesting and complex, and what counted as pop music and radio FM stuff became a playground for some of what you're talking about, with not breaking the rules, but exploiting what you can do with key changes and time signature variety, and basically using more than one mode per song, for surprise, for variety, for excitement. And I think this is the part of math that I need to be checked. Sometime after the 80s through the 90s, popular stuff started getting simplified again. We're back into chord loops and very one key at a time kind of stuff. But it's an interesting observation. I don't know if it means anything, or if we're going to maybe ready for a new direction, or if things are going to stay that way.
That's a really interesting point, and it's very interesting also, because there was jazz was alive and well and a lot of the rock and roll people were playing jazz and country, so they were throwing in jazz chords. The Beatles is a really great example of a band to follow because as their albums progressed, so did their musicality. To the point that the shit that's going on in, Sgt. Pepper's is really fucking impressive. There's also there's a lot of really, really cool stuff. Sorry, I just got distracted with my brain. But that's really true, because then when you look at you look at Pink Floyd and stuff, and the layers of notes and swirling galactic notes that are going on there. But I don't know, it's really interesting. I do tend to agree that I don't know. I don't know without generalizing, because but there was a definite return to really simple music, in the 80s, because a lot of the synths were one note, and the people didn't have they were from like Bristol, and they didn't have a musical training unless they were Alan Wilder.
There's a really good 12-tone video this week on Hungry Like the Wolf, and he gets into it. It's fantastic as far as analysis, like a
they
theory
throw in
analysis.
the B flat. It's great.
Yeah, people miss that, but yes, absolutely.
It's a really interesting thing, and I think for your own music, it's fun to experiment. And I was going to do something where I hook up a keyboard and talk about fucking around with notes. But the Duran Duran thing is like C C C. I can't remember. C C C
E, and then
and it is a B flat, isn't it?
Yeah, there's the C D E kind of thing, and then like they wait until the very end to sort of give you the tonal solution to what they might have done with a key change, and it's like, here's the half step away from what you thought we were going to go to resolve. Yeah, it's
something Duran Duran do a lot, where they'll go major 1 to major 4, major 2 to major 5. So in a situation, so that would be C C C, F F F. That's normal. C major, F major. Then they'll go D major. So when you go from F major to D major, that F sharp moves up, and it makes it feel there's this moment of power. F F F, D D D major, then to G major, which really easily slots back into C. It's a fun chord progression. Give it a try. And it adds something. And you can write your melody in such a way it doesn't touch that F major, that F sharp, I should say, when it goes to D major. It just flows. Always Alice in Wonderland. Always Alice in Wonderland. Keep it simple. Simple, simple, simple. Yes. I'm going to shut up now, Ivan. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, Mark.
I totally lost what I was going to say.
All right, I'm so sorry. Mark.
Before you knock Bristol, there's a band I absolutely adore from Bristol called Mesh, and they do some amazing stuff. Like, totally, I have been listening to Almost Nothing But for like 7 months straight, and I still haven't finished their entire discography. Like, I'm just hooked on them entirely. Amazing, and I hope they're still a going concern, because they were doing nothing but getting better. But Duran, like the Hungry Like the Wolf thing, largely, my understanding of that historically, I mean, the overall progression, yeah, I get what you're saying, but like the irony, I think, in that particular song is that the main hook for that, where it starts, is all Jupiter 4's ARP. It's basically C major. It's just the ARP pattern from a Jupiter 4.
Random arpeggiator.
Yeah, well, it was, but it's the algorithm is specific to that particular unit, so they, it just stuck.
Was it a Jupiter 4 or a Jupiter 8?
The Jupe 4 has the random ARP, and
So
I
does
don't
the
think the 8
Jupiter 8.
does, so the argument is that it's the 4. But
Jupiter 8 does.
I thought it was an 8 at 4, but everywhere I've seen it documented, it's a 4. Yeah.
Well,
So
their loss.
well, he had both. He's got 2 working 8s left, and one of them just took a dive like about 3 years ago. So I don't know if he got it fixed or not. But most of his stuff's in Ableton now. Like he had his tech sample everything into Ableton, and when he plays live now, he's using JDX ACs times 4, but they're all being used as MIDI controllers to Ableton. and everything's in there. He's just got his whole library, and he's not really even using them as synths anymore. They're just glorified MIDI controllers, which saddens me because that's supposed to be an awesome synth, right? But
Which one?
JDXA from Roland.
JDXA. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's the large JDXA, and then there's the small little mini key JDXI. But he uses 4 JDXAs, but he's not using the synthesis at all, as far as I can tell. Just they're just glorified MIDI controllers for him. But it makes me sad. But I mean, he had to do it though eventually, because topic drift small, but like eventually you do enough stuff over 4 decades now. They're 41 years or so anniversary. Like, how many synths can you migrate your sound between and keep it faithful? That's before you start drifting. I mean, I've heard some thin versions of some of their earlier sounds. I've heard some fat versions of some of their mid era sounds. I mean, it's like getting a consistency in there from the studio cuts. I can see a reason to do it. I always wonder though, when you do that, do you not lose some of the like the envelopes, you lose or the filters, do you not lose some of the ability to actually do some of the manual stuff that you would do ordinarily? I think it's sort of how much do you lose in that process is sort of an interesting side question for me.
Cool. Yeah, dude, that's a conversation that we should be having. Maybe the next conversation. Juan, welcome. Go.
Hey, how's it going?
Amazing.
So you guys mentioned the simplification of music, from where it was to where it's going, and we might be touching back into more harmony-rich and just more complex music now, musically. I constantly think about what the effects of technology and synthesizers and sound has done to that, and if it's still affecting it or if it's pushing it forward. You were talking where music kind of came down to a point where it was single note melodies. It wasn't really that complex, but the sounds were rich. The sounds were new. It was almost something no one had heard before, when we started seeing synthesizers come in. And then once DAWs came into play and accessibility to make music, and with some of the VST plugins we have now, these sounds can get really deep and you could do so much with them, where it's almost going back to what you were talking about earlier. This is just a thought of atonal music where there's droning, but they're just these rich sounds that move. And I think from my perspective, what I'm seeing now is that we're starting to get more harmonically rich sounds, even more so now than before. And this could just be my lack of education on before, but where that's coming back naturally because the plugins, tools, everything we have kind of supports it even further, versus some of these older synths being limited to just the boundaries of the physical components of it. So just kind of wanted to explore that to see what you guys felt about that, the idea that sounds have become more richer, more controllable, more XYZ about them, and we can do so much more with a single note than we could with maybe a guitar or violin or a cello
or an
whatever.
orchestra.
Or an orchestra, yeah, good point. So yeah, just tossing that in for conversation, see what you guys thought about that, because I always think about that every time I hear, be it a dubstep track, drum and bass, or an industrial tune, something in the electronic world, EDM even. It's like there's sounds that it's like, I've never heard that before. I know how it's being made up. I can sit down and dissect it, but it's like, that was interesting, and it's a single note. And you could do the same with notes that are going to be played in a chord or however else in clusters. But yeah, just wanted to kind of drop that there and see what your guys' thought was on how that affected how music is now kind of digested and listened to compared to before.
That's really fascinating. I would gladly let's go on that tangent. Thank you, Juan. Ivan.
Yeah, no, on the simplification back in the 80s, look at what the tool. It really, I think it was mostly driven by the tools, because, again, like you mentioned, there was a lot of monosynths, and then we got a sequencer. Yes, look at those sequencers they had. They were kind of horrible compared to what we've got available now, and so I think two things have gotten better. One, the tools themselves have improved their capabilities, like now we've got Ableton, we've got Cakewalk, we've got, Bandcamp, we've got, you pick your DAW. And DAWs the answer is just yes for pretty much anything, which is good because you can add a great deal of complexity and tonal variation by simply having something that sequences better. Also, machines that they're crazy poly compared to what was available back then. And then I think back in the 80s, it was really easy and kind of normal to become a musician without any sort of training at all whatsoever. Whereas these days, somebody's like, oh, I'm going to make music. What do you start doing? You start watching YouTube videos on music theory because
that's an interesting
you
point.
do that. So like the training is infinitely more available than it was back then.
Okay, that's a great point. Thank you very much, Razzie.
Juan, I think first I'm going to refute that things got simple in the 80s and it took through the 80s before some of the modal and harmonic key change kind of stuff started fading out of mainstream music, and also stipulate that just happens to be what's on the top of the popular stuff. Not that people weren't experimenting and doing all the same amount of innovation. It just wasn't the zeitgeist kind of thing. But I'm trying to think of like, okay, so the first sort of wave of post-industrial into industrial dance, I think, Juan, to your point, might have been where sampler, expression, DIY, synthesizer, tones, like the textures and tones became like fully embraced and utilized and brought into this as a sound. And yeah, it relied on rhythm and it relied on a certain lyrical angle and mood for sure. But like that was such of a piece and so intrinsic to the sound. And I think that also 10 years ago, EDM dubstep might have done the same thing with a new generation of the richer, more complex digital emulations of the stuff that they were using back then that got so much fatter and thicker and more harmonically complex with modulating with multi-breakpoint envelopes and, controlling with virtual patching to trigger off things like side chains and stuff like that. So, man, I want to think about that a lot more, but those are two examples of times where I think what you're talking about really comes together for me. Not as a fan of either of them necessarily, but as a like historical point of that.
Brilliant. Thanks, man. Mark.
I think, and Rick Beato loves to beat the drum about the lack of harmonic complexity in today's music compared to what used to be going on. But I mean, he just, I mean, and he has a point too. But I think there's two interesting points for me, sort of branching off from this, but related, really tightly bound. And one is generative music. State Azure on YouTube, for instance, has done some amazing things, generative sets in Eurorack and modular. And I mean, it's that almost begs the question, like, okay, what direction are we heading in? And I mean, if you take just like a simple synthstrum deluge, now we've got Euclidean sequencing on that thing, and I can literally turn around and spend 2 hours trying to get everything lined up to where it's both easy to do and it's hard to do well. It really is an art form. So when I see somebody execute it well and musically, and I think this is true with all modular for me, but that is a thing. But how much of that, when you go generative like that, how much of that is you're just the seed for a randomizer and a starting point, and how much of that is actual creativity? I like where it goes a lot of times, but how much of that is actually art, I think, is sort of maybe a valid question. The other is sort of loops back around to like the non-Western thing, though. We're talking about scales and whatnot, but we're talking about the tech behind it. Take just a simple, you hit one note on, say, a Moog, or a sequential, whatever, and you do a filter sweep. Now you're holding the one note that's technically a tone, but you're altering the frequency of the sweep along with its resonance. Which note is that? Because you've got the bass undertone, but you've got a whole. You're basically doing a large gliss over like the entire spectrum. So it's like, which note is that, technically speaking? Because a lot of times, if I'm listening to it, I'm not in analytical mode. I get confused. What are they doing? You know, it's like you think they're doing it one way and they're doing it an entirely different way, and you realize you clue into what they're doing, but it's like, oh, so you just really held that note and you just, you know, and it's like, and you try and program that into a synth and you don't realize what you're doing. You're like, how far can I pitch shift this thing? And that's not how they did it in 1982. It's just not, you know. It was a lot simpler to do back then. I run into that trap. I used a Hydrasynth for like 6 hours on one patch. It was wrong. It's literally twist the dial. It was that easy in the end. And it's just like, so, but no, what is that note? Seriously, you're holding one, but you sweep the spectrum. Which is it? I think it's a valid question.
I'm going to throw it to Rezi.
Yeah, I'm champing at the bit. That's the harmonic overtone sequence that I think you're hearing, and you've got to have a really resonant peak on your filter if you're actually hearing the filter's note take over for the bass note that you're filtering. So just to be clear, if you have a single note on the synthesizer that is rich in harmonics, say triangles, sawtooth, square wave, and then you run that through a filter device and you sweep the filter point from very high to very low, you'll remove some of those harmonics. And those overtones, those harmonics above the fundamental note that you're perceiving, are what Mark L. is talking about removing. And as you do that, you may do it with a bit of accentuation at the point where you're filtering. And if you do that accentuation very hard so that it's boosted at the point you're filtering, you can get other notes on top of the note that you're doing rise to prominence in a way that you can hear them. But you've got your hand on a knob. So they're not necessarily 12-tone notes, equal temperament. They're the notes between the notes. And you can do some very fun, vibey, oh, now we're doing an interesting interval that beats against itself. So anyway, I find it a very exciting thing to explore. But the answer is it's not the notes, it's the notes between the notes most of the time until you land on certain other ones. And the harmonic overtone sequence is an important thing because that's where we sort of derive our tonality from. So cool.
That's a really good point. This, play with that. Play with the... and it's actually really fun as well as if you have an ARP Odyssey's great because it had a bandpass filter, and the ARP you could actually hear it. You could hear those harmonics, dun, dun, dun. You could hear them. And what's interesting is if you try and pitch those harmonics, if you try and throw another pitch to greet them, you're going to find, like what Rezi said, is they're not equal temperament notes. They're kind of close to, but. And that's where there is a universe of sound and potential. This is why drone music, you listen to a fucking sitar or something, and it's amazing because there's so much stuff in a fragment of sound, in a cloud of sound. There's so much amazingness. I just wanted to pick up on something else. There's so much going on in this conversation, and I'm very grateful. About the audience expectation about it. And I think sometimes, often, always, actually, as an artist, one goes, but will people get this? And exactly. And it's like, don't let that stop you. I'm kind of doing an experiment at the moment with ANGELSPIT and Ice Planet 9000. I'm sort of candy flipping. Where ANGELSPIT, I'm trying to create the most harshest, ridiculously brutal fucking shit I can possibly do. And my problem is that stuff becomes very structured for me. So it's an exercise for me to try and go, how hard can I do this while keeping it not too chaotic? Because I don't like music. Actually, that's a lie. I fucking love chaotic music, but I don't like creating it. I have trouble creating it just because my brain gets to a point where it's like, Okay, dude, pull up. And it's a really excellent exercise. You know, I've built instruments and I'm distorting shit and blah, 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 blah. And it's great. And there's real drums and there's a whole bunch of shit that isn't getting corrected. Shit's out of tune. Drums are slightly out here and there. And I'll stress slightly because the guy, Dave Natofrom, who plays the drums, is a fucking beast and he's on it. So it's a really nice experiment for me to go, okay, I'm going to throw something firstly for myself at the audience, and I'm happy with it, and they can take it or leave it, because, you know, it's this cleansing thing that has to happen in my brain, because I am so bogged down to the concept of how is the audience going to do this? Is the audience going to like it, back it, buy it, therefore pay my rent and justify me keep going it? I just want to separate from that for myself for a bit. Excuse me. The other one is Ice Planet 9000, where I'm really pushing the boundaries as far as harmony, harmonics, and an actual harmonic chordal structure. Some of that shit's just fucking weird, and I like it. And it's really fun also to just drench synthesizers in stuff and just go, here is a nebula cloud. You're floating through it for the next 10 minutes. How do you feel? And it's really challenging to me because for me, you know, everything's got to be a 3-minute pop song. But Brent, the other guy in Ice Planet 9000, keeps pushing to go half an hour, man. Just go. And yes, there's a market for that and everything else, but it's not about the market. It's about my brain. And it's about me letting go of stuff. And everything you've talked about here, like pulling in tonalities and pulling in frequencies and pulling in, maybe I'm going to use a different filter besides a low pass. All of that stuff. You know, maybe, you know, the Japanese have got this concept in some of their forms of music where it's like there's no bass. There's no bass. There's no defining bass, because when you define the bass is defined. But when you don't define the bass, it's bottomless. And that's the most wonderful concept, is that if you have a bass and then you take it away, it's like somebody swimming in a boat, and then they go into the ocean and they're swimming over the Mariana Trench. And it's beautifully terrifying. Big droning bass, take it away. And just go, whoa, now I'm in space. Something has happened in my brain emotionally. You should try that. Take the bass out. Take the drone out, like big fucking drone, pull it out. And just pull it out. Don't fade it out. Go, it's gone now. And what happens in your brain is really fascinating. Anyway, so I think, I guess what I'm trying to say is, as artists, just free yourself from the concept of, oh, will this go viral on TikTok? You know, just free yourself from that and fuck around, because remember, your audience is you. Like your demographic. If you look at, if you're making music that is true to your soul, your demographic is actually you. They are your age, your interests, your predominantly, they're you. So if you are doing something that you like, that is inspiring and challenging and exciting to you, they're going to find it exciting as well. That's it. Razzie.
You kind of summed it up exactly where I was going to go, and really appreciating your ideas about the artist's prerogative, and that it is crucial to explore some of other things that you're interested that may not be as closely related to the thing that you're known for. And I hope Juan jumps in on this, because he's a man with a lot of identity specifics about some of the projects that he's done. And I, on the other hand, generally dump everything into the same project. And if I'm going to be doing something that seems a little bit weird, it just gets still, you know, this is not a 3-minute song structure song. It's a noise piece. And also on top of that, I really appreciate what you're doing with the Ice 9000 stuff. I think it's fantastic. And I do have a lot of other some friends from way back in the day that are doing musique concrète and other found sounds pieces that I'm just like, oh, I'm so tuned into this. I get it now. And for so many years, I hadn't really paid attention to it. But those expressions as the artist really do reveal bits of personality that I think are essential for the audience.
Yeah, thank you. Juan!
Yeah, so Brazi, yeah, you mentioned different identity. It's more of an identity crisis, to be honest, where it's just constantly wanting to make everything you possibly can, whatever you're feeling. And whenever I hear something new, it's like, that, how did they do that? I want to do that. I want to make that feeling again. But to speak to what, Carl, what you were saying, I think the important part is intention, which you kind of touched on as well. It's like, what's your intention as an artist? If it's to be, to making XYZ amount of money or success or notoriety, whatever it is, well, you got to build the product that's going to lead to that. But I also think, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but I do think as an artist, a musician, you do have to just kind of sometimes step outside and walk away, metaphorically, like, hey, if you kind of feel like just twisting knobs today or working on a project that has no quote unquote mass appeal, but it does feed your soul on some level, do it. Absolutely do it. Most of the techniques I've learned, the new angles that I found and the stuff I try to work on have come from that, sitting there and taking, we were talking about harmonics in a sound wave. It's like, yeah, take a sine wave, put a peak on it on your EQ, an extreme one, throw a distortion over it and just sweep that thing. And you'll hear movement in that sound that it's like, no one is going to quite understand how you did it or what you're doing, but it doesn't matter. It's that explorative process that in the end, you've either learned a new technique or you came up with a really cool sound that you can use for something. But in terms of, exploring genre, style, whatever it is, I can't encourage anyone enough to do it. Just go and start throwing things, throw spaghetti on the wall and see what lands. And in the end, if you love it, Carl, I can't agree more, someone's going to love it. You know what I mean? But I think it comes down to, and I'm glad you said that, by the way. I wanted to touch on that because what's kind of kept me going with music is one that if you told me no one would ever hear my music again, I'm still going to keep doing it. Doesn't matter. But I know the fact that as I'm writing this song, there was a chord progression I came up with, and it's like, there's a feeling I'm having now. I've never had that feeling. There are centuries of music before me where someone's done that already, but I've never done that. And now that's inspired me to do something on top of that or keep building on that. And there's someone else out there that is going to enjoy the flavor in which I did that. That's already been done, but they'll enjoy that. So knowing that at least there'll be one other person in the world that might say, hey, that was cool. It's like, well, that's good enough for me. But again, if your intentions are, pay your mortgage and buy a nice car, it's like, well, you kind of have to play the game. That's a whole different conversation, I think, and maybe you guys can chime in on that, where there's a creative expression as an artist and there's the business of music, which is, unfortunately, the line is clear and sometimes it's not, Either way, to wrap up, I would just say, I agree 100% with what both of you said. It's like explore, if you're craving a certain expression, just go for it. You're going to learn a lot. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to make stuff that sounds like shit, but it also might make something amazing, and will someone like it? You won't know till you put it out and you'll learn.
The truth. Thank you, man. And I'll just pull it back to Eno, because that's what we do, is Eno, let yourself play. You got into music because you were fucking around and you had no idea and it was fun. Get back to that point. Experiment and play. Everyone I talk to, it's this battle with time. I'm so busy. You ask someone how they are these days? I'm busy. How are you, man? Busy. Busy with work. Busy with... It's like, dude, fuck. Watch less fucking Netflix, starters, because that's a fucking waste of your fucking life. Newsflash, don't give a fuck about The Mandalorian. Don't fucking care. Write your fucking music. Make your damn art. That's what you're on the planet to do. The universe has blessed you with this brain that turns chaos, madness, and mayhem into something beautiful or awesome, however you want to define beautiful. So utilize that shit. When you finish, you get home from your job at the bank or whatever, get home, go for a walk, turn off your fucking phone, and play. Play like, pretend Brian Eno is in the room with you. Look up the fucking oblique strategy cards and get something weird. Play. You must play. Your brain needs play. The problem is people don't have play. And, you know, I think everybody is bored because everybody's bored and everybody's making art and content and everything else that's an expectation of what their fucking market wants, and we're trying to appease an algorithm. The algorithm doesn't listen to your music or give a shit. Sure, it puts it in front of people, but I don't want to have that fucking conversation. This is about you. And, you know, I always say, if you've got a car and you can drive, wow, I'm so jealous. Get in that fucking car and go on a sonic safari. Take a microphone, bang shit, and fucking do even better if you have a guitar and a keyboard that's got batteries in it, like a dinky Yamaha piece of shit, or you pick it up at a fucking Goodwill for like $20, you know, like a PSS piece of crap. Stick some batteries in it, drive your car out to the middle of a fucking desert, or take your acoustic guitar and listen and smell the desert and listen. What is this? That's the sheriff's helicopter, by the way. What is the desert, the environment saying to you? Oh my God, pack a fucking lunch. Go have fun. God damn it. I mean, it's hard right now because it's snowing and shit weather, but that's what I reckon. Or do something really fun. Take your dinky keyboard. It's got to be dinky piece of shit. It's got to be a dinky piece of shit. And go to a mall. Stick on your headphones. Have a piece of paper. And absorb all of this life energy. Just absorb it. Or jump on a train or public transport. Absorb all of this shit. And let it inspire your music. You're basically throwing yourself into this ocean of energy. Music's about taking energy around you and creating it into more energy that rocks. So go to a mall. Do that. And make sure that the keyboard is utter crap. Because if you write a hit, if it sounds good on a keyboard that's utter crap, it'll sound amazing on your plugins and doohickeys. That's all I want to say. Mess, it's great to hear you. Blow my mind.
Yeah, no, I love that you name check the dinky Yamahas because I have 4 of them, and like my favorite is my guitar. But yeah. Yeah, no, just on the thing of like playing and creativity. I listened to a podcast yesterday about Tiny Tim. What a hero. And he like what drove him is the fact that like when he was young he would listen to the old recordings and like with the funnel and literally sit in his room, turn out all the lights and like stick his head in the funnel and like listen to this old music. And that was just like he went to this like mind place where he was like making his own radio show and just like really imaginative. And like that's such a beautiful place to be. And like I feel like that's easy to do when you're a kid, but like it's such an important skill to keep up when you're an artist, because like if you focus too much on like, okay, I have to get in the studio, I have to like do this, do that, like that stuff can't be happening if you don't have that time of like actually nourishing your imagination and like having a starting point. And like yeah, that's definitely such an important thing.
Good on you. Yeah, thank you so much. I see no hands, which always makes me anxious. Somebody throw something shitty awesome in here. Excuse my French. Juan!
Yeah, just to kind of carry on what you were saying and what Mess was saying. I remember being younger and hearing music and just, it was magic. It was voodoo. It's like, how did they do that? What's going on there? And as I started messing around with, DAWs for me back, this was, I don't know, I'm 38 now. So I never had my hands on physical gear. It was always the computer. I was working in the box, but the DAWs back then were way more limited, but there was still kind of that explorative, which I think everyone experiences with any sort of instrument, of just like, what does this do? What does that do? And that just showed you a new world every time you clicked, every time you stroked a string on a guitar, there was just always something new happening. And, you know, like Matt said, over time, you just kind of get distracted by these invisible obstacles you've created for yourself, or these obligations you think you have, or maybe your actual real plans to pursue and accomplish something, you know, get signed to a label or do this or get this many listens, which are real things, I guess, pursuing a career in this. But I know in my experience, something that kind of opened my eyes again, and it was refreshing. I found myself in a position where I didn't have access to my tools the way I did. You know, I didn't have my studio, quote unquote. And all I had was my acoustic guitar and my iPhone with no accessory mic on. It was just the iPhone microphone, which is surprisingly pretty good. And in my car in a parking lot, and just started recording. And the limitation and even the sound quality of the ambient noise of outside, or even the car or whatever, that all started inspiring like just a whole new direction. And that stuff eventually, you know, and nothing came of it. It was nothing I ever released or ever did anything official with. But again, it just inspired. There was like tapping back into that whole not having your set of tools you go to. Carl, we talked, I think it was 2 weeks ago, about that, you know, having that process that was gone. And you're just kind of like freed to just explore that moment as it is. So I think, like you said, Carl, it's like having not your go-to instruments, or not quality instruments, not having your environment or anything of the sort, just drastically changing your circumstance and still trying to be expressive will just bring so much out of it. And I think something that, you know, I could even play devil's advocate to what I'm saying. It's like, yeah, but you know, you got to have a goal, you have to have an idea. This entire process, I think I said it before, is also exercise. This is drilling, this is practicing, this is flexing that creative brain, and even your brain and your skill sets, where you're going to get new tools from that. You know, fast forward to now, I'm at a point now where it's just like, where my mind's at is not only music theory, harmonies and chords, but it's just what makes sound. To keep it simple, it's like, what is sound? Let's just start there. You know, from pulsating frequencies through the air, but then you modulate that, and harmonies and harmonics, all that all came from just trying something different, changing circumstance, kind of abandoning protocol with your things, and just letting things happen where they happen. And also amazing conversations like we're all having here, and hearing other people's ideas and where they failed and where they succeeded. Even if taste is different, even if genres are different, it's still music. And expressing music in different environments or with different tools, you know, breaking your norm just produces so much more opportunity to learn, to express, and to create. I'm going to stop there because I'll keep blabbing if I keep going.
No, that's awesome. Thank you. You just reminded me that most people when they listen to music, they don't hear bass, guitar, drums, da-da-da. They don't hear verse, choruses. They hear this cloud. And it's really important to remember that. And it's really important to think like that. To think that what you're creating is a grand sculpture. That to other people, they're not going to see all the different parts in it. They're not going to see all the different mediums. They're just going to feel this emotion or this feeling, a feeling. Because, you know, man, everybody's got that track that makes them just go, wow. You know, that it leaves a feeling. It's such a powerful track that even musicians go, I'm not hearing the bass guitar and everything. I'm just hearing this work, a piece, an opus. And I wanted to talk about something else, but I forgot. Razzie!
We spend a lot of time here navel gazing over the tool marks rather than the sculpture, and that's fine by me. I mean, I'm here for it, but it's an interesting. Okay, I can't rehearse a song, I can't practice my parts, I can't write a thing without earphones, mics, reverb, and echoes. Like, I can't do it anymore. I don't know, maybe I never could. Maybe it was always amplified, but it's kind of weird. Like, I have photos of me with an electric guitar not plugged into anything in the desert that you were talking about, Carl, to go do something in. I managed to get the photos, but I didn't record anything. Am I broken? Can I have help?
Well, No, keep going, and we'll come back to this.
There may not be an answer. If there is, please give me one. But I also there's two things that I had written down that everybody already brought up in interesting ways, and that is, in music composition, does the artist have to experience the emotion they're trying to evoke in the listener? Even.
Oh, that's really interesting. Wow. I'll throw the door. I just have to check an email really quickly. Sorry, there's
No time like the present. Might as well. Could be important.
No, it's all good. Okay, I want to talk about this, and anybody who else wants to jump in on this, please go.
Yeah, I'll jump in right quick. That is oh man, I don't even have a formed thought for it. It was a big statement you said, because I think that is something I think all of us do that on some level. You know, and in the sense that I know I have, at least, where I'll write something where I don't feel something from it the way someone else perceived it, someone else experienced it. And that is always a treat. That's always awesome when I wrote something, and to me, it's like, oh, I'm trying to make something ominous and kind of this and this. And when someone hears it, it's like, that is the happiest thing. I was like, what? You know, so maybe not necessarily with the intention of writing something you don't feel, but needs to be felt a certain way. But then I think you also, where my mind went immediately was, well, isn't that the job of music? Like, isn't that in itself what we do as composers, writers, producers, where it's, you know, writing something for someone else, you know, for someone else to experience. And then just to circle back a little bit, you know, the music isn't the parts within it, it's a sum of its parts. I think that's the same thing I just said. But we make music that way, or I'm assuming most people do, you know, where it's like you start with pieces, you start piecing things together. So in the end, at least for me, the feeling doesn't show up till close to the end or around the middle. It never shows up at the beginning. You know, whatever this is going to end up being, it's like, oh, now I feel this. Unless I'm making something specifically to feel a certain way, which might speak to what you're saying, where it's like, hey, I'm trying to make a hard, dark dance track. Let's just say that. It's like, well, I'm not even feeling that yet. That's my intention going into it, and I'm aiming to that. Luckily, sometimes, you know, along the way, you'll get inspired and something changes. Like, this is no longer that. Now this is this weird trip-hoppy, down-tempo, whatever. But I think there's a deeper philosophical conversation about what you just said that I can't quite touch. I haven't figured out how to put my finger on it, but I know that it resonated with me. So I'll go ahead and finish up there, Carl, to fill time while you were finishing up. You could jump in.
Thank you. I was just checking some of the comments, and there's some beauties. Mark, take it. Thank you, Jan. Juan. Jan. I mean, Mark.
Juan, yeah.
Mark, it's yours. Go.
Oh, well, there's two Marks.
I'm sorry. Mark Bird. Mark Bird.
Okay.
Mark, you're muted.
Okay. So,
No, I'm sorry. Mark Bird, you're muted. Mark Bird, the floor is yours.
Okay. Anyway, okay, so Raza's question. I guess, like, I understood that as, like, can you write a love song if you don't really understand love? Like, that's how I kind of came at that. Like, I feel like that's kind of disingenuous. Like, you know, I had a pretty, like, middle-class upbringing, so it feels like I can't properly make a song about, you know, growing up poor unless, like, I talk to someone and really get to know them and understand their position. But at the same time, like, I wouldn't really feel comfortable with that kind of song, because that's not me. I don't really know that feeling. I just can guess at that feeling. So I in that case, I don't really think artists can/should try and make music about emotions or feelings that they do not themselves understand or have experienced. It just feels like it wouldn't be genuine.
I love how you framed that. It was not the way I intended it, and it makes it much more interesting.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that was great.
Fair enough.
That was really, really nice. Thank you. Mark.
the other Mark.
Mark L.
Yeah, right. So Two thoughts on that. I think a part of the root of this conversation, like this is a subset of communication in general, and my observation, and I have a mass communications background originally, but I think part of this is that probably 90% of communication, it's a guess, it's not pulled from anywhere, it's just a guess. 90% say of communication is on the interpretive side. So you can say something or take police events, right? A crime occurs, you line up 10 witnesses, you're going to get 10 different stories of what actually happened, even though they all observed the same events. Same thing with communication. You iterate the information, but it's interpreted different ways, filtered through each person's experiences and psychological makeup. So I don't necessarily think that it's critical that you feel X intensity of Z or necessarily feel it at all. Because if you can convey it, it's subject to interpretation. It's open to interpretation. I can name lyricists that specifically are vague about what they do because they don't like to tell people how to think or what to think. That's part of it. And the other part is there is a jaded part of me that don't judge, but there's a jaded part of me that for years has wanted to have just an instrumental track ready and waiting, lying in wait, and wait for like the next natural disaster or the next man-made disaster, you know, a tragic event, slap lyrics together, finish the tracking, mix, master, have it go viral, and boom, cash in. Just because you could. I mean, call me cynical and jaded, but, if you're going to manage to profit once, that's probably the easiest way to do it these days. And you wouldn't have to feel anything. Like, how invested are you? Like, people, I mean, it's as a philosophical thing. You don't know these people that are in this tragic event, whatever it is. You never knew they existed. You never knew their names before the news cycle spun them out. How much of a part of their lives, of your life, were they? None. And then suddenly everyone is just morally outraged or just emotional and grieving. How can you grieve someone you never even knew? So no, I think this happens all the time. And just expanding it to music, if you can use it, why not? I'm not having an ethical problem there. I'm really not.
Awesome, thank you. It's really interesting that I'll pick up on what you said, Mark L, about how let's say a cloud is coming, a big cloud, a big dark cloud full of rain is coming. So some people are going to go, oh great, my crops are going to get watered, that means there's going to be more food. Other people are going to go, oh, I can't go to the beach. Other people are going to go, oh, my house is going to flood. So it's really interesting how people interpret everything their own way. Even if you say something to someone pretty clear, there's going to be a misunderstanding. Exactly, Mark L, as he said. It's just really fascinating that unless there are images to go with it in a movie context where it's obvious, I want you to feel scared now I want you to feel happy, you don't really have a lot of control. And I mean, like, if you're really clever, you can fuck with that in a movie situation and add dimension and stuff, but the director won't like you. But anyway, it's really interesting that, like, I get lyrically misinterpreted all the time, and I don't want to. I think it's great to say, I'm going to go back to the cloud thing, that the music is a cloud, and people get to interpret that however they want. So the lyrics are kind of, it's not exactly clear what angle I'm coming at this from. And same with a whole bunch of things. And that's a really cool thing as well, is that if this is really devastating chorus, like really devastating lyrics in the chorus, and you're slamming it with these like really powerful, bold major chords, people go, it adds something, you know? Is it, are you being sarcastic? Are you saying that this is a good thing? You know, it's just really weird. I don't know, is the answer to that question. Juan.
While we're talking, I keep thinking about, what Mark L just said about communication. It's on the interpreter's end. And that also got me thinking about jobs, people's jobs. We learn skill sets, we learn the inner workings of them so that we can communicate something that we may not be necessarily, it might be someone else's feeling that we're communicating or expressing. And then when you look at music, we were just talking about earlier about, 12 tone Western music, and there's rules, and each of these chord progressions, these combination of notes, they emit a certain feeling or evoke a certain feeling. It's like, this feels this way, minor is sad, major's happy, whatever what they say. And it's just, I think that already has a built-in component to expressing something you don't necessarily mean to express or intentionally want to express that you may not be feeling. Now, Mark Bird had brought up an interesting angle to it, the narrative side of it. It's like, where I can't speak about this or express this if I haven't experienced it myself. Now, I think that was on a deeper level, which I did like, where it's like you're telling a specific story that isn't yours. And I think there's a middle ground with that. Are you an observer in that story that's being told, or are you putting yourself in the first person, things like that. But I think now that we're talking more about it, Razi, what I keep thinking is just like, my argument is like, not so much like, that's interesting. More so like, wait, isn't that how it is? Isn't that kind of the point? Even if you feel it or don't, you've learned all these skills, be it production, synthesis, music theory, whatever it is, it's to be able to create emotions that you may not be necessarily feeling. So just kind of wanted to put that on the table and see what the thought was. Probably doesn't push it any further, but just, kind of feels like that's the point. Argue me, please.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. And that's something we're going to hit on very shortly. Mark L.
Well, I think what you're saying, Juan, is, that almost borders on acting, really. Doing something that you're not actually invested in and can express. But I think also for me, I can relate this back to, for me, if I don't feel music, I may as well not be listening to it. So you can give me Dave Gilmour playing one note that just reduces me to tears, as opposed to Steve Vai or Joe Satriani playing like 64 million 64th notes that do nothing for me. And Ivan will say that's a complete wank. We've had this discussion like 20 dozen times. But it's, if I'm not feeling it, what's the point? But that also speaks to this, though, associatively, is if they meant to convey something, they must have been feeling something, theoretically, unless it was just a technical exercise. And if I walk away feeling nothing, does it somehow invalidate their musical expression? And I would think the answer would be no, because obviously they felt something. It's like they're invalidating someone's feelings, right? But did they do a poor job? Not necessarily. And again, you're back to the interpretive side. So if a huge segment of the audience doesn't like, I don't like Taylor Swift, half the world loves Taylor Swift. If I don't get it, does she fail? No, not really. But does she have to feel what she's feeling to, I don't think there has to be a meeting of the minds. I think you either gel with something or you don't. And I'm not sure it has to go deeper than that, really. I don't know. I'm a kind of person that can just take things at a surface level and like, it's sort of like the Stephen King thing. It's the story, you don't have to necessarily imbue a lot of symbolism into it. And so I don't read more into it than that, really, but I'm just thinking, they didn't necessarily fail. I didn't necessarily fail. It was just a failure to meet in the middle.
Sure. For sure, man. Thank you. Razzie.
Yeah, technical exercise with this fucking desperate trajectory to try to get to feel something. Like, that kind of sums it up between what everybody's said. This is confessional hour again. It's past the time. it's a lot of, spending agonizing time in excursions and trajectories that have nothing to do with where you might end up in the attempt to hopefully synchronize your emotional state with the work that you're doing. For me, again, I keep saying you, I'm talking about me. And get that 15 seconds of actual catharsis or some sort of, epiphany or whatever, to feel like you're connected with the thing emotionally. And Mark B is framing on it from another perspective. I get the feeling Sting is always singing about himself. I think it's like kind of patently autobiographical, whereas I think maybe Bowie, you believe that he's in character when he's talking about certain things he talks about. That's all.
Yeah. I think I just forgot what I was going to say. But I will say, two things. One, every great track in me personally, like all my great tracks that I love to listen to, all evoke a feeling. They're all emotional. And what's interesting is none of them are happy. Oh, no, actually, some of them are happy and sad. I don't listen to sad music. I make sad music, but I don't listen to it. Maybe it's not sad. Maybe it's just fucked up. I don't know. But it's really interesting that a lot of the feeling and the mood that is broadcast is this feeling of expanse to me. Like it's a cloud feeling. It's like, wow, that's a whole bunch of cloud. It's not happy cloud. It's not sad cloud. It's full of attitude cloud, and it's great. The other thing is that I have a theory that the more you produce something, the more you squeeze the emotional intent out. I could be very wrong on that. It's just something that I've noticed, that grit and low quality brush marks, for want of a better term, convey emotion. Maybe the more the song is in contact with the human spirit, the more and the roughness of the human spirit, the more the song conveys that emotion. That's just something I've noticed, because when I produce the shit out of it, it's like, oh god. And maybe that's like why there's a lot of music I don't really like, because it's like, it doesn't make me feel anything. Like, it just doesn't make me feel. And I think in order to make your music feel, you have to do it with sincerity, and you have to take a risk, even if that's the vocals, even if that's the synths, even if that's whatever. You have to imbue as much of you into it as you possibly can. That's what I think. And that's just my opinion. So, with that, Markle, is your hand still up? All right, I'm going to throw this to Ivan. Ivan!
So yeah, I stuffing emotion into a track. I am by default a pretty sad bastard. I should be making sad bastard music, and then I sit down to write some sad bastard music, and it sounds like freaking carnival tunes. I mean, thankfully, I've gotten over my Invader Zim era, but like, yeah, it just ends up sounding like the happiest damn thing you ever heard. And meanwhile, I'm just like, how is this? How did I get here?
What's wrong with Invader Zim? You got over your Invader Zim? Don't get over your Invader Zim era. That's your whole problem.
For a while there, everything I wrote sounded like the intro for Invader Zim.
That's good, though.
Some of it was. Some of it was not.
All right. I thank you. I hear you, and I just want to start breakdancing now. Does anybody else have anything they want to throw in on this very interesting topic? That you have no control over how people absorb your art. And it really sucks as well, because like I've seen so much shit get taken drastically politically out of context. Come on. and it's like, man, it's just, I don't know, just got to keep making your art. Markle.
That works. So the question is, if you start a track like, and I have the same problem Ivan has, I mean to go in one direction and right turn. So I end up someplace entirely different sometimes than I anticipated going, and oftentimes it works better. Sometimes it's just abandonware. But the question is, if you do that, you know, like, did your feelings change? Did you fail to feel it deeply enough? I mean, it's really a question of, you know, did you decide to, did your feelings change? Did you misinterpret how you were feeling at the time you started it? Like, were you really in that mindset, or you know, was it sincere? Because you ended up someplace else, you know, and is that, where did that come from? Was that a mental block and you just had to switch streams, or was that just like a mood shift and now I'm not feeling that anymore, now I'm feeling this, and let's just run with the new feeling? And it becomes very complex, because then you've got not only one set of interpretation on the listener side, you've got a set of interpretation while you're composing that's your own interpretation of what you're doing, and then one cascades to the other, and in the end, only the audience only hears one. You know, assuming you have an audience, which is somewhat suspect at sometimes, depending who it is, like me.
Thank you. I want to pick up on that, but after Ivan, go.
Shit, I had something brilliant to say. I am really sleep deprived today.
Okay, can everybody just like react as if Ivan just said something amazing?
Oh my god.
Yeah, no, me sleep deprived. What? Yeah, no. I think that you know, like, again, you know, pretty sad bastard, and should be making sad bastard music, ends up coming out sounding like, you know, carnival tunes.
That's a good thing, though.
I think that's because there's some part of me that is not a sad bastard, and that part gets to come out when I'm making music. You know, like my current project is where there's a whip, there's a way.
That's great. I don't know what that means, but go with it.
Got to see the old the old Bakshi Lord of the Rings movie. Oryx and whips. I mean, it, you know, about as timely as it gets right now. All right, I'll shut up.
I love that. I don't know what's going on, but I love that. Razzie, give me more stuff I love.
Mark L., when I fail to get to the place I thought I was going, I do consider it a technical failure, absolutely, a lack of skills in trying to achieve what I was going for. But also time well spent honing the craft and getting better. And that is why not every song makes the cut to even finish. Gets beyond riff and some melody and just didn't go where I thought it was.
Yeah. I just totally lost my train of thought just then. But I think that if you, like, you know, and I'll pick up on something I answered before, that, you know, you're writing something and halfway through the process you hear a track and you go, oh, I want to do something like that. And then suddenly this track you're doing goes like this. And that could be a good thing. You know, like, I think that throw all the herbs in there and cook. Herbs. There's a H in it. Herbs.
What letter is there at the beginning?
H. Herbs.
I'm not familiar with that.
Herbs. There's a H. So say herbs.
Herbs.
Yeah, herbs.
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 Hospital.
You don't say hospital. You say
Hospital.
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 Right. That's
Hospital.
right.
I'm going with Mark. I'm going to the hospital.
And
Yeah,
herbs.
the hospital. You know, get stopped by the hotel.
I'm not in a
Holiday
hurry.
Inn.
Actually, it's making sense now. Thank you. All right, I get it now. Ivan.
I forgot to lower my hand.
Michael, did you want to start breakdancing with your mouth?
I literally also just lost my train of thought.
What is going on today?
We're all sleep deprived. I got 3 hours, you know? Give me a break. No, I mean, oh, no, what you were saying about if you hear some, if you hear a track and it's just you want to do something else and it just diverges. I also find I had this happen, and I don't, maybe it's just because I'm novice would be a strong term, but I'm not as experienced, especially in music theory, as the rest of you. I just do everything by ear, so it was very little theory. But what I found is I can do a track, and I did one at one point. There was a video game, Descent Underground, and anyone who knows the Descent 2 soundtrack knows what that was like. And I was like, I had a vision for it, and a lot of us were in the pre-order community for this game. We're talking about where the music should go before they actually had someone sign to do it, and which turned out to be Dan Wentz. And I was like, here's what I would do, and I did it. And it came out sounding good, but it was like it wasn't quite what I mean, it's what I wanted, but it wasn't enough. And I find if you go back and put in more effort, I mean, it's really that simple. Go back, put in more effort, put in a new section, put in a bridge, something. And I was so glad that I made the effort to do it, because if I had just stuck with what I had originally planned, it would have been decent, but what I came up with, the way I did this like middle build section, is like, and I showed it to the wife. She's like, "Yeah, no, you went and you put the effort back in, and it went somewhere else." And sometimes it's just a matter of revisiting it. I also have tangentially, I have a 48-hour rule, like 24 to 48-hour rule. Like if I think something's great, doesn't matter how long I spent working on it. So a lot of times it's one night because that's all I have sometimes, but I will come back to it. I'll just leave it. Don't listen to it for like 24 to 48 hours. Come back to it. If you still like it, it's worth pursuing. If you're like, I know I don't drink, I don't know drugs, what the hell was I thinking? Then it's probably something you should either abandon or massively revise. But yeah, things can diverge like that. And sometimes you should diverge them intentionally. Go back to them, put in the extra effort, because you can take something that's mediocre and really elevate it if you just give it a little more love, a little more polish.
Good on you, Mark. That's actually very good advice. Thank you. Juan.
I'm also drawing a blank now. I had it, but I'll try to pull it back in. Starting somewhere, ending up somewhere else. And then also I wanted to touch on, I think the idea I had, sorry about that, guys, was there's music I like that I don't make. My favorite music is not what I make. Even though I try, every time I go back, I'm like, the stuff that stands out to me is so far from what I make. And I think the distinction there is expression versus, experience. One of those where, this is our craft, this is our art, this is what I want to say versus what I want to hear. And sometimes that meets in the middle, where, well, I want to say the same thing they're saying because I feel what they're saying. And then you have your interpretation on it that comes out. But something I'm stuck on now, and I'll try to loop this all together, is, I gave myself this year, I decided I was going to make a full album. I'm going to work on a full album. There's already boundaries being set. There's already obstacles I've just set now before I even started it. I decided I'm going to make X amount of songs by this time and hopefully release it before 2024, even if it's the day before 2024. And there's a kind of like a blueprint I have in my head. This approach, this production style, this sound, these feelings, whatever it is. And I'm starting each of them now, and I can't get them started. The palette is there, the color's there, the texture's there, the mood is there, but there's no song, there's no piece, there's nothing there. It's almost like if I show it to someone, it's like, hey, that sounds great, it sounds good, or whatever they react to it, but what is it? And that's where I'm stuck. So Yes, please go ahead.
No, you keep talking.
Okay. Um, so, so going back to starting somewhere, ending up somewhere else, I find that, this has an intention. This has a goal. The goal is to create a finished piece that gets released, and hopefully I push it and do all the things we got to do as musicians within the business to try to do whatever, be it pitch it to labels or pay for marketing, whatever, all that fun stuff. But that's starting to get in the way. So I'm finding while I'm making these tracks, it's like I try to get that out of the way, try to, remove that from the equation and just work. But then we get, what I'm finding is we resort back to our influences, we resort back to our skills, our technical skills, our creative skills, and just try to find a way through that. And shit, I just had it, what I was going to say, and I lost it again. I too didn't get much sleep last night. There's a couple bands I'm listening to now that I've listened to them forever, but I'm listening to them with a different ear. Okay, I think I'm getting back to my point. Our taste changes over time, especially as musicians, because we're constantly looking at everything with a microscope. We're listening to sounds, we're creating sounds, we're learning how sounds are made. So our appreciation for music grows. And I think sometimes that gets in the way of our listening experience. I think I mentioned this last time. There was at least 2 good years a while ago where I didn't listen to me. I didn't hear music. I was just listening to the sounds. I kept judging, like not judging, but analyzing. Well, how did they do that? Was this a sweep? Is this that? Like really dissecting it. And it wasn't until I had to force myself out of that by listening to different genres, by just getting into, I don't know, let's go listen to some Nordic folklore, whatever it is, just to hear something different, to remember what it was like to hear music and experience music. I kind of going on drift there, but I guess I'm also posing a question is, how do you guys get out of your own way, be it with creative process, be it with the goals, or when you start finding a groove, but you can't quite get it? Mark, I was gonna say, you mentioned putting it down for 20 to 48 hours. I actually put it down for months intentionally, where it's like, it's done. There was a good idea there. I can't move it forward. I'll put it away. And a couple months later, or even years later, I think I recently released some stuff that I started 4 years ago. And I was like, oh yeah, this wasn't bad. I just couldn't push it at the time. I couldn't finish at the time. But when you have your goals, that boundary, that limit is there. Like, you got to do this. You're treating it like a job now, which I don't think is a bad thing. Discipline is not bad, but as long as it's not at the cost of creativity. So that's kind of my question. It's like, how do you guys find that balance of work versus fun with it when you need to keep it genuine?
Okay, my first question, I'm going to look back to that. This album that you've given yourself 1 year to create, how many tracks are on it?
The goal is going to be minimum 10.
Okay, give yourself 18 months.
Okay.
If you want to say the end of the year, make it a 6-track or an 8-track. But believe me, and from what I can gather by the way you write, it's do something else, come back to it, go away, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, which I think that's great. That's how I do it as well. 18 months, mate. So you might want to say 4th of July 2024, but that's your call. Secondly, once again, it comes down to having fun. And the ideas come to you when you are least expecting them. I have always found they just come. And those tracks that come when you are least expecting it, you're crossing the road and a piece of song comes to your brain or whatever, they're awesome. And the problem is you can't quantify that, or you can't set a time thing on that. They just happen. Other times you have to sit down at a keyboard and make the fucker work. You have to sit down and write. I actually think it's a really idea to discipline yourself, saying in 2 sessions a week or something, I don't know, you are going to write. It's like you're exercising that muscle in your brain that allows you to do that. And you also have to set aside time to play in your sandpit, like to fuck around. And if everything you do is on a door, you might want to get away from the door. You might want to go somewhere and just sing. Take your phone, record yourself, go to a parking lot because you sound better, and sing, or a stairwell and just sing. Make sure no one's around and just sing. Like speak weird human language. And when you do this sort of thing, it really it'll put you into a different place. And that's the other thing about making music on a bus or in a mall, is that you're going to hear conversation. And every now and then somebody walks past you and they say something brilliant. And it's like, dude, that is a chorus right there. You know, so it's just doing stuff like that that keeps you out of your rut. And also something I like doing that you might also find inspiring is that I'll say, okay, in this album, I'm going to make it as if it is 1982. So all the technology on that album will be 1982. It's going to be John Fox. Or, you know, technically. Then there might be something else. And that means 8 tracks. That means, or I might be really inspired by Sweet Dreams by the Eurythmics, which was 8 tracks. I will do it with the mentality of, I have this limitation. Or I might do something that's 1978. So therefore, nothing digital. Although I'm going to be using my DAW, but the whole process. Or it might be 1992, or it might be now, or it might be in 30 years' time. Donna Summer's I Feel Love. Her and Giorgio tried to do a track that would be the future. Oh my God, they nailed that one. You know, watch fucking a movie like Liquid Sky, which is set in the future, which I think from our perspective is the past. It was done in 1980, and it's just amazing. It predicts the 80s. In fact, I've mentioned this before, Bowie was so blown away by that video because they referenced Bowie. Bowie saw it, and Bowie made his fashion video was based on Liquid Sky. And that video inspired the 80s. The whole Neuromantic thing exploded. Liquid Sky was done before there was Neuromantics. And it's Neuromantic as fuck. It's just inspiring. So, yeah, that's my thoughts. I know people who'll go, they don't like hot food, and they'll eat really hot food. Just to kind of like get your head out of it. That didn't answer your question at all. I'm going to shut up. Markle.
A couple things that you said, sing in various environments and stuff. I find there's a huge difference in how I'll execute something if I have IEMs or headphones on with reverb and delay, as opposed to just doing it dry. I mean, it's not just the discomfort level. I need comfort reverb because I absolutely hate my dry voice, but I always want people to hear the voice that I hear, but I think everyone does. But slap some effects on your vocal change, switch that up, or if it's instrumental that you're stuck on, switch patches, throw effects on. Sometimes slapback delay can be a good thing. Sometimes just like triple, dotted eighth is a go-to for me, where it just changes things up. I've found things as simple as I've not even switching patches, switching MIDI controllers, like playing on an Arturia 61 key that's like semi-weighted as opposed to playing on the 88 key that's fully weighted. I play entirely differently, different style, even on the same patch when I have the weighted keyboard. I play more piano-esque, as it were, and that changes everything. That's one way to break out of it. I still haven't found a way to break out of the same chord progression rut. I just try tossing random chords that I figure out at things and see how they work, see what I can toss in and get away with sometimes. But because for years I had a problem, like I get in the same damn 6 chords. It was crazy, and it's down to lack of music theory on my part. But no, I mean you can change things up that way and get yourself out of things. So I have a lot of stuff like you do, where like I can't, I get 16 bars and it sounds great. Where do I go from there? And that's down to music theory again too. But it's like I'll just let it sit there. 2 years, 3 years, 5 years goes by. Oh, I can do this. And then usually it's like that works great. Now how do I bridge the two? Because they feel disjointed, and like if you try and stick them directly adjacent, they clash, sort of thing. They're supposed to work together, and it just needs a little finesse. But that's an exercise that I think is just comes down to experience. I don't have that experience, but yeah, I have to let a good majority of things sit that way in an unfinished state myself. So I identify with that definitely.
I just want to pick up on that very quickly before I throw it to you, Razi. Juan, do you play guitar?
Yeah.
Damn. Do you play recorder or ocarina?
Neither.
Great. Get one. Because they cost like $5.
Yeah.
Get an instrument that you suck at, so you have no idea what you're doing, and you're going to remember to record it. You're going to make a whole bunch of mistakes, and see what happens.
Yeah, that's a good call.
Razzie.
Of course, there's no single answer. There's no single solution. There's no single fix. It's just the universal panacea where you're out of your own way. Congratulations. People who are out of their own way have a lot of solutions, and you can emulate them and look to what they did, but they might not apply to you. I would say get out of your own way equals wake up at 3 fucking a.m. like Carl and have a routine and get shit done and release it. Not get out of your own way is be like Razi and don't do that and have stuff that's been finished for a year or 3 or 5 or 7 and never finish it. And somewhere in the middle of that is getting out of your own fucking way, but there's no answer to that, is there? I think
Do a martial art.
do the work. I mean, that's the only thing. I mean, obviously, there's this the only glib, concise, get it in something you can actually say aloud is, yeah, you have to show up and do the work. Then the work gets done. But
Truth spoken, my friend. Thank you. Juan!
I appreciate everyone's input on that. It's yeah, that's what it's coming down to. It's do the work, and it's not, just to clarify, it wasn't so much a writer's block or inability to truly continue with it. It's more of a doing the work, staying organized and focused. And something you mentioned earlier, Carl, was and I know there's been hundreds of conversations, probably books on this, but the zone, flow state, all that stuff where you just find it, and the more you practice it, the more you can kind of, I wouldn't say, my opinion, get into it. You can just remove the barriers that allow you to get into it. That can be practiced, I think, and that can come down to discipline, schedules, routines, intentions, practice, if I didn't say that already. The suggestion of picking up an instrument or something that it's you're not familiar with, and like putting yourself in an uncomfortable position and using your skill sets to navigate that and come up with a solution, or as Mark L suggested, kind of changing things up, or just throwing in a wrench into what you already have just to see what it does. I appreciate that, because that is probably my immediate go-to in everything I do. It's like, here's a piano piece, let's throw this on it, let's throw this synth. Or why don't we just throw the kick being the note, and just these weird things, and then it takes you somewhere else. I guess if I can maybe try to clarify or get a little closer down to the issue is actually having an intention. You kind of have the routines and the things you need to do to be able to complete that. That's the word. There's a vision. That's the word I'm looking for, and that's the obstacle, is bringing that vision to life. Not so much knowing where should it go or where can it go. So that was a miscommunication on my part, but just bringing a vision to life. You can hear it in your head, you can see it, it's already started, but it's not quite, like, you haven't found your footing for it yet. So hopefully that's a better question than what I posed before, is when you do have a clear vision, you clearly have the skill sets, tools, or inspirations to do it. What would you say your guys' steps are to put that in motion and then keeping that momentum going? We've probably answered that already in different ways collectively, but I don't know if that makes a difference. But it's like pursuing a vision that is already started. How do you continue that? Hopefully that's a better question.
Thank you. That is an excellent question. Markle, hit me.
I would say that if so I'm gonna complicate that actually because I have the same problem. And I will start off knowing exactly the sort of thing I want sometimes. And it's not just a case of you start at A and you somehow end up at Q. It's not just that. Sometimes it's like Heisenberg's principle. You can't fully observe something without altering it. As soon as I start, because I'm so light on music theory, I will end up hunting and pecking a little for what it is I'm looking for. I know what I'm looking for, but the problem is, in the process of finding how to play it, I will end up tainting my own experience, and that will sabotage my vision horribly, just terribly. And it's like maybe I wanted to go from A to D's complementary, so fine. But maybe I wanted to go there, but maybe something more. It's obviously going to be something more esoteric. I'm like, how do you play that? And you're looking for it, you're hunting for it, and you hear something else, and suddenly like your train just derails and your vision goes, I don't know what I am anymore. This is cool, or no, that's not it. And now I just completely forgot what my vision was. But the other thing that complicates it too is like if you hit a stride and you're all clear, even in your own vision, do you need to steer clear of exposure to other people's materials for the duration, at least part of the duration, because I find that can also sort of taint your vision and alter your mindset of where you're going, because you get a little leakage from your input into your output, and it's it's sort of like I guess I don't know, I'm not really into the wine tasting thing, but the closest equivalent I can imagine is like testing colognes and you need to smell coffee grounds, or testing wine and you need to clear your palate or something. It's like there needs to be a separation there, I think, between listening and working, so that you don't actually sabotage your own vision with somebody else's work, not just for copyright purposes or anything like that, but just for clarity of vision and consistency. That the latter part is kind of sort of my observational advice. The first part is like, yeah, I hit that too. I don't know how to solve it either.
Thank you, man. I got an answer to that, but I'll throw it to Razzie first.
Keeping the vision going, collaborate early and often, not necessarily as a full-on dual-person effort, but with a trusted associate who might comment on the work and answer again when you ask later. And yeah, it's that would be a nuts and bolts kind of answer. Just one tip.
Brilliant. What I'm going to do is I'm going to close out because we're kind of on time, but this is my jam. Firstly, Mark, my suggestion is have a picture or a short phrase that represents the song or what you think the song is, and stick to it. While you're kicking around a song and people are vulnerable when they do this, and you're listening to music that is amazing, it might discourage you. Obviously inspire you to go in a different direction. That's not always a bad thing. But if you're concerned about being diluted, then listen to classical. Listen to something else. I heard this interview with New Order once, and they said when they're working on an album, they just listen to Mozart because it doesn't have drums in it. So you've got to be a stubborn bastard and make it happen. And Juan, in answer to your thing, it's like 99% perspiration, 1% inspiration. It sounds like that 1% inspiration is kind of done. You've got to make a note to yourself that this song is good. If at the beginning it's a good song, make a note saying, don't freak out. It's a good song. Because, when you hear it a million times, it's like, this song sucks. I hate myself. Everything I do is crap. I'm going to stop now. I'm not doing music anymore because everything I do is crap. And I'm a bad person. And everyone's laughing at me. Don't worry about that because you've got a little tick box that says the song's awesome. Shut the fuck up. Discipline. This is dojos, man. And you've got to be disciplined like this is kung fu because it is kung fu. It's a martial art. Get up at fucking 4:30 a.m. Do your fucking training. Make the goddamn... Because basically you're working on this cool move. Get up and make the move happen. Depending on when your brain works. I've always said my brain works really well in the morning. So that's why I get up in the morning. And it works at crap at night. So I just go to sleep. Discipline. That is the be all and end all, I think. Does anybody else have something they want to throw in there? I see the hand of the Razzie.
Yeah, a little quick one. Practical tip again from my experience, effective. Short notes, a visual mascot, and collect your example tracks, what you're ripping off and inspired by, into the one document, so you can refer back to that per song, and then maybe one for the whole album in a folder or something like that.
That's really good. Reference material. That's excellent. I'm gonna, as always, we're gonna leave this open. We're actually gonna do some recording to congratulate MTV TV for 2 years of amazingness. I'm gonna put my hand down because I'm that guy. Thank you so much for joining us here at Art of Rock. Next Saturday we are doing it again. Boom. Join us, please. ANGELSPIT'S Twitch, because Twitch rocks. We're now going to rate to MTV TV because MTV TV has just the best everything in the world. So we're rating and we're out of here and we're going to hang back here and keep chatting. Bye. 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 Bye.